The Honourable Member for Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this government understands that in order to carry out their varied and difficult missions in the service of our country, the Canadian Forces need to have four important things: healthy, well-trained and motivated personnel, the right mix of equipment, the right portfolio of properly maintained physical infrastructure, and a high level of operational readiness. That's why in 2008 we made these elements the four pillars of the Canada First Defence Strategy, or CFDS. It is our blueprint for building modern forces adapted to the security challenges of the 21st century. Canada First Defence Strategy outlines a 20-year investment plan to ensure that the Canadian Forces have the capabilities and the flexibility to continue serving Canadians in a security environment that is all but predictable. Mr. Chair, the government recognizes that people are our most important asset. As a former commanding officer of a reserve infantry unit, I know that to be especially true when we consider the intense operational tempo of the past years. Since taking office in 2006, the government increased the size of the regular force by 5,000 to reach 68,000 personnel. This allowed us to sustain our operations in Afghanistan, where we deployed more than 40,000 troops over a decade. And that includes the Honourable Member for Pickering Scarborough East, who served there in 2007. Here, here. We also relied heavily on our reservists. In Afghanistan alone, approximately 6,000 reservists have served alongside the regular force, sharing the same stress, the same dangers, and the same risks. Mr. Chair, now that our operational tempo has slowed down, the government is taking steps to ensure that reservists are provided with adequate career transition support to facilitate their return to part-time service. In the same vein, the honourable members are fully aware that our high operational tempo has been hard on our troops and their families. That's why we've taken many steps to improve the support we provide them, from additional funding to help with the treatment of mental and physical injuries, to initiatives aimed at improving assistance to our military families in need, and programs to support the families of our fallen. Of course, Mr. Chair, all of the support we provide our personnel doesn't amount to much if we don't also provide them with the tools they need to do their jobs. Having the right equipment is what allows our troops to serve us to the best of their ability, and it is what helps keep them safe. This is something that the government has recognized since the day it took office in 2006. At the time, our troops were dealing with a fierce insurgency in the Kandahar region. To ensure their safety and operational success, we acquired critical capabilities like the C-17 Globemaster III, strategic lift aircraft, Chinook helicopters, and Leopard 2 tanks. These acquisitions have made a difference to our campaign against the insurgency and have saved Canadian lives. And through CFDS, we continue strengthening the Canadian Forces by providing them with the right mix of capabilities across all three environments: on land, on water, and in the air. On land, we've invested $1 billion to upgrade our fleet of third-generation LAV-3 fighting vehicles, which form the backbone of our mechanized infantry. The upgrade of the LAV-3s was one of the components of the larger investment in our family of land combat vehicles program, through which we will acquire other capabilities, fleets of close combat vehicles and tactical armoured patrol vehicles. We're giving the Army the tools it needs to effectively and to safely conduct operations ranging from combat missions and counterinsurgency to peacekeeping and domestic crisis response. To renew our capabilities at sea, we established National Shipbuilding Procurement Strategy, a $33 billion investment to replace our aging naval fleet, and equip the Royal Canadian Navy with a new generation of surface combatants, joint support ships, and Arctic offshore patrol ships. This will allow our sailors to continue the critical work of exercising our sovereignty, protecting our coasts, and defending our interests abroad, and to ensure that the Royal Canadian Air Force has the tools it needs to operate in the 21st century. The government is looking to replace a fleet of aging CF-18s with a fighter aircraft that will give the Canadian Forces the flexibility to meet the challenges of the evolving, uncertain, and unpredictable security environment of the next decades. That's why we committed to purchasing a next-generation fighter capability in the Canada First Defence Strategy, and we remain true to that commitment. Mr. Chair, we've also increased our investments in our third pillar, infrastructure. Having the right training facilities, landing strips, roads, docks, buildings, utilities, and accommodations is absolutely essential to the work of the Canadian Forces. That's why, as part of the Canada First Defence Strategy, we committed to replace or refurbish approximately 25% of our holdings within 10 years and 50% within 20 years. In line with this commitment, the Department of National Defence has announced over $3 billion in defence infrastructure projects across the country since March 2009. In the past 2 years alone, we've initiated close to 100 projects. They include investments that directly support the operational effectiveness of our troops, such as research centres, training facilities, or hangars to accommodate the new equipment, as well as infrastructure projects that provide better support to our men and women in uniform, like access to proper housing or new integrated personnel support centres on bases and wings across Canada. While these are only a few examples, they illustrate just how far-reaching our efforts in renewing defence infrastructure have been, and how important it is for us to keep investing in projects that make a real difference in the work of our troops. Now, Mr. Chair, these investments in personnel, equipment, and infrastructure must be complemented by a focus on readiness to ensure that we sustain the ability of the Canadian Forces to respond when called upon. Readiness is the difference between success and failure. And, Mr. Chair, we're not only talking about how quickly the Canadian Forces can respond, we're also talking about their ability to adapt to changing circumstances. The government knows that one of the keys to readiness is to conduct regular, real-world training. That is why, for example, since 2007, the CF conducts an annual sovereignty and security operation in the north, known as Opitz, with its whole of government partners, and more recently also with international allies like the US and Denmark. Operations like this ensure that our troops remain prepared to meet whatever challenge comes their way. We need to maintain the same kind of readiness that we displayed both at home and abroad over the past 10 years. This level of readiness excellence, sustained through sound investments, is what allowed our troops to bring much-needed humanitarian assistance to Haiti after it was struck by a devastating earthquake in January 2010, and to intervene at the side of our allies to protect Libyan civilians last year, and to quickly come to the aid of survivors when First Air Flight 6560 crashed in Resolute Bay last August so tragically. That's why we will continue our efforts to help the Canadian Forces ensure that they arrive in ready condition whenever and wherever we need them. Mr. Chair, by supporting the work of our troops at home and abroad, our investments through the Canada First Defence Strategy have produced tangible results for Canadians. So it's important to continue delivering on our commitments we made in the strategy. Of course, Mr. Chair, we are mindful of the economic climate, and we are taking steps to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of national defence to ensure that we get the most out of every dollar invested. We can't forget that we have a responsibility to continue building a modern and agile force suited to the security challenges of tomorrow. And we move forward with the Canada First Defence Strategy. We will continue to maintain our emphasis on investments in personnel, in equipment, infrastructure, and readiness. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I do have a couple of questions for the Associate Minister of National Defence. And to the Associate Minister of National Defence. In 2009, as part of our Canada First Defence Strategy, the Government of Canada announced its plan to acquire the next generation of land combat vehicles. The Family of Land Combat Vehicles program, valued at approximately $5 billion, consists of the acquisition of 3 new fleets and the upgrade of the fleet of third-generation light armoured vehicles, valued at an estimated $1 billion. I understand that upgrades will be performed on 550 vehicles, and that this contract is a great long-term news for the industry and the economy. I was hoping that the Minister can further update us on this project and explain why the upgrade is necessary.
The Honourable Associate Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I feel a sense of duty to acknowledge the service to Canada, to our Canadian Armed Forces, by the Honourable Member, and want to thank him for his dedication to duty and having served honourably as he has for many years. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the light armoured vehicle is the Canadian Army's primary fighting vehicle. It is used for quickly and safely moving infantry on the battlefield, combining defensive protection and firepower necessary to protect against such threats as mines and improvised explosive devices. Major upgrades to the light armoured vehicles will dramatically improve the safety of our soldiers. As operating environments and future threats evolve, the Canadian Forces must be prepared to counter threats through improvements in our vehicles and equipment, and we're doing that on an ongoing basis. These improvements have been influenced by lessons learned during recent operations in Afghanistan, as well as technology advancements. The light armored vehicle upgrades will provide our troops with the improved protection, mobility, firepower, and surveillance in order to safely and effectively carry out their missions. The vehicles receive a completely new lower hull, including engine, transmission, wheels, suspension, and mine-resistant protection. In addition, the turret will receive a major redesign and new fire control systems for the gunner and commander. These upgrades ensure that the light armored vehicle remains a truly state-of-the-art combat vehicle. The first vehicles will be delivered to the Army within a year. I am proud to say that hundreds of hard-working, skilled Canadians are making these improvements in factories in London, Edmonton, and across Canada. And, Mr. Chairman, I had the great honor and privilege of being amongst them as we unveiled this new program dedicated to making our men and women in uniform safer as they engage in very difficult and dangerous circumstances. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The honourable member for Etobicoke Centre.
Yep, Mr. Chair, again to the Associate Minister of National Defence. The Conservative government is often criticised by the NDP for working with our allies on programs like the Joint Strike Fighter. By working with our allies, we can save money, share technical expertise, mutually benefit from shared knowledge, and undertake projects that would have been cost prohibitive for us to do alone. The Mercury Global Project is another international project that the Associate Minister has been involved with. This project is critical to ensuring that our military can communicate effectively to do their jobs and to complete their missions successfully. Could the Associate Minister please tell us about this project? Who is involved, and was it delivered on time and on budget?
The Honourable Associate Minister.
Chairman, again, I thank the Honourable Member for his question. And Canadian Forces missions in Afghanistan and Libya highlight the secure exchange of information between headquarters, formation, and units is a critical part to the success of modern military operations. And that is why the Government of Canada is participating in with its military allies in the wideband global SATCOM system, also known as Mercury Global. And this partnership provides Canada with access to satellite systems, further strengthening secure communications during our missions and cooperation with our closest military friends and allies around the world. It enables Canada to be a part of a global satellite system of additional bandwidth and communications capabilities, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and combat support information necessary for missions today. And this agreement will not only support Canadian Forces' requirements for strategic satellite communications for the next 2 decades, but will also be at a lower cost than the Canadian Forces would pay to maintain the status quo. And this is yet another example, Mr. Chairman, of our government's leadership. It demonstrates how we continue to provide value to taxpayers. At a cost of $337.3 million over the 20-year time frame, Mercury Global represents a significant cost saving over planned expenditures on short-term lease of satellite communications capabilities. And finally, this forward-thinking, decades-long approach is indicative of our careful consideration that national defence and the Canadian Forces take when dealing with taxpayer dollars, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Time for one more short question and answer. The Honourable Member for Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but this time to the Minister of National Defence. Minister, the issue of infrastructure has been discussed earlier in these proceedings, but I would be remiss not to add from the Western perspective to this discussion. And in March of this year, you announced a new $54 million building to accommodate the Land Force Western Area Headquarters, Joint Task Force West Headquarters, and one Area Support Group Headquarters. This is in addition to the announcement of $3.6 million for 4-Wing in Cold Lake, Alberta in September of 2010 to modernize key infrastructure at the base. Sir, how will this new building and infrastructure programs like these achieve the government's overall objective of ensuring the efficient and effective use of Canadian taxpayer dollars?
The Minister of Defence has about 30 seconds. The honourable member for St. John's East is raising a point of order.
I know the chair has diligently throughout the evening been reminding members that they should address questions to the chair, but this member insists on calling him sir and asking him questions and speaking to him directly, even though he's in front of him, instead of directing to the chair. I wonder if he could be reminded of his obligation.
The honourable member is correct that all comments ought to be directed to the chair. The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the question with respect to aging infrastructure. We have a number of bases, a number of infrastructure projects ongoing across the country. In fact, in the last 6 years or more, we have invested roughly $3 billion in addressing some of these infrastructure needs. The one in specific response to the question with respect to the new accommodations at Canadian Forces Base Edmonton is no different than some of the other investments that we've made. This is for Land Force Western Area Headquarters. The results will be a more integrated, better coordinated command team that can coordinate and lead domestic operations in Western Canada. They can track Canadian Forces operations and personnel around the world. Our largest base at CFB Edmonton has contributed mightily with respect to the Afghanistan mission, other deployments. And also this new infrastructure will provide timely and seamless information in support of senior military and government decision makers, as well as communicate those decisions effectively. All of these efforts are about improving the space. The construction of this new facility in Edmonton by Pentagon Structures, Mr. Speaker, will be providing 161 local jobs. This is true of all of these infrastructure investments. It has a tremendous impact on the local economies, and these investments are felt at a time like this.
This completes the time for the honourable member from Etobicoke Centre.